Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our first speaker, who will be giving a bit of a lay of the land as far as the uranium space is concerned. And we couldn't think of anyone better than Philip Johnson from UxC. He's the Vice President of Fuel Cycle, responsible for uranium supply developments with a specific focus on the junior and near-term producers. So I'll pass it off to you, Philip, to get us started and get us all excited about why we should be investing in uranium. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, everyone. It's a little quicker. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. Oh. How's everybody doing today? All right, good. So yeah, I am here to essentially give you a lay of the land as we stand today, both supply and demand. First off, I'd like to thank Red Club for the opportunity to speak to you all. It's great to be in the same room with everyone. I look forward to chatting with you at any of the breaks and the after hours. And if anybody's going tomorrow to New York, I'll see you there too. So, this industry is such, and has been for quite some time, since 2011, that we always start off our presentations noting that we are market agnostic because we have to be. We are on essentially both sides of any contract. We are the middle of the market. We are the price reporter. So this is our look at the market, informed by tons of data, enhanced market analytics, uranium requirements models, everything from top down to bottom up. So this is just a look at kind of where we are today, and I'll try to give you some clues as to where we're going in the future, and a couple of, I call them silver linings going forward. This is just an overview, where I'm going with it. I only have 30 minutes today, so I'm really only going to be able to go demand, supply, put them together, and we're done. I'm not going down the fuel cycle, which, if you know anything about the nuclear fuel cycle, it gets quite sticky when you get past conversion and into enrichment, where you can take a massive uranium, enrich it, and actually have more than you started with. You really can't do that with anything else. So I'm neglecting that part of it. If you are interested in the enrichment market, we are the people to contact. This is us. We're fuel market analytic house, market data analysis research. We contract with suppliers, utilities, investors, government agencies, NGOs, and all people in between. We've been in business as UxC since 1994. We were spun off from a uranium brokerage house just called UX, which was in business since forever. Our headquarters is north of Atlanta in a place called Roswell. It's where I work. But we have people all over, presidents in Boston, people in Austin, Vienna, elsewhere. Our major lines of business are publishing industry market reports. If you are in this industry long enough, you will come across our logo on something eventually, at least I hope. We are the nuclear fuel price reporter. I'm going to get into that with my next slide. And we do client-focused consulting and specialized market research. Going forward, this is just kind of a look at what we produce. The UX Weekly at the top is kind of where we marry both prices and data. It's our flagship publication without a doubt. It's been around since the 80s. It includes our weekly spot U308 prices. It includes our month-end prices for everything from uranium conversion, enrichment, and EUP. As you go down the list there, for this room, what I really want to highlight is our uranium production cost study is coming out in 3 weeks. At least I hope so, because it's a huge, very dense technical report. It is very interesting, and it gives you a good idea of what it costs to mine uranium and what it's actually costing current producers today, and with projections out in the future. But really the point here is we have an incredibly strong team. Everyone has a background steeped in nuclear of somehow. Some were nuclear reactor operators, some were in the investment side, some work for government agencies. So we are very diverse and well-trained in the fuel cycle. There we go. Hit on it before, but going to come back to it here. The UxU308 price, this is our price. This is the price for uranium. It comes out every week, every Monday. This is the industry's only government-regulated price, and that's because it's used to settle the New York Mercantile Exchange and now CME futures contract, which we are UX. We are the UX on the contract. It is the primary spot indicator referenced in almost all uranium contracts. We had a recent survey done in the industry. It's used to reference about 72% of contracts. It is other people will take that price and marry it with others. That's why it's not a higher number. But I'm just supposed to show you that's kind of our stock and trade. And so I kind of wanted to start off with a look back at what was cool and where we are now. Of course, everybody wants it to be $136 a pound like it was back in 2007. Those days are gone, but that does not mean that there is not hope for the future. And as everything in this market is dependent upon demand, I figured it makes sense to start with it. Lead with demand. We'll get into the uranium market in just a minute. But today we got 443 reactors operating. It's 393 gigs of power coming out across 31 countries, comprises about 11% of total global power supply. And of that is the lion's share of carbon-free power production. Got 53 reactors under construction. We count about 25 countries that shifts, that we consider steady state countries that we see are not going anywhere anytime soon. Unfortunately, those last 4 countries between the parentheses are they're experiencing headwinds. And I think if you're paying attention to the space, just this week, the CEO of Volkswagen, CEO of Linde, CEO of Continental Tire, all came out and said the German nuclear phase-out is ridiculous. We should be phasing out coal first, keep nuclear plants online longer. Unfortunately, we don't predict that's going to change anytime soon. Japan is a bad situation since Fukushima. I'm going to get into that later. Taiwan is politics trumping science, and Belgium more the same. There's at least a glimmer of hope there in the future. We count several faster growth countries in our list, and it's primarily China, India, Russia, and the UAE. UAE's kind of run into some snags here lately, but still consider them to be a good front runner for the Middle East region. Their partner, South Korea's KEPCO, has done a great job to put together a 4-unit nuclear power plant in record time, and despite a couple hiccups, we project them coming online with the first unit next year. So moving into the next category, we call them about newcomer countries. These are people that have never had a reactor operate, at least not commercially, maybe a research reactor, but we only see about 5 or 6 units online likely in those countries by 2030. All this data feeds into a greater model that we'll get to later. Main point is the red point at the bottom, fallout from Fukushima, not literally, but shale gas boom and government subsidies for renewables. Right now in the US where I live, we have renewable power that we have wind turbines that don't spin but are getting paid to operate, and it's absolutely ludicrous. So we'll get into government incentives for nuclear. I generally loathe this chart, but I threw it in because I think it's very telling to show the blue and green lines at the bottom. That's respectively North America and Western Europe. You see over time as they get out towards 2030, they are tapering off, whereas the orange lines at the top grow quite rapidly, especially after the mid-2020 region. That's Asia, Oceania. There's also the yellow bar, Africa, Middle East. more hope for growth in those regions. We are ultra conservative at our company because this industry, if you have not learned anything from my talk, let it be this: demand grows upward glacially. It is not rapid, which is why when you see what China is doing, it is the exception, not the rule, and it's great that it's happening. It's great for nuclear power, and that kind of dovetails into the point at the bottom. 38% of the world by 2030, nuclear power will come from Asia, from 29% today. That is incredible growth. So let's talk about major issues affecting demand today. We've already kind of touched on some of these. The top two bullets are U.S. focused. Reactor closures, especially premature, well-operated, licensed for several years reactors are being shut down, especially in merchant markets where they cannot compete with, once again, subsidized renewables, cheap natural gas. But a silver lining to throw in there is right now, Ohio's Senate is debating a bill. If that passes, the governor said he would sign off on it to keep 2 more reactors online there that otherwise will shut down in the next couple of years. Pennsylvania, similar legislation. The problem is Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, is the home of shale gas, and their lobby is doing everything they possibly can to kill it. So we are not as hopeful there. There was talk at the federal government level to support nuclear power, and while the current administration has proven that they are very pro-nuclear, they also don't want to step on the toes of the oil and gas industry at the same time. Moving into trade issues, if you know anything about uranium today, there's a Section 232 petition that was filed by 2 U.S. uranium producers that calls for one of 2 options: a Buy American quota that reserves up to 25% of total U.S. requirements to be fulfilled by only U.S. production, and or tariff. This report was formulated by the petition was done by the producers, sent on to Department of Commerce. Commerce did their report, sent it over to the president. He has until the middle of next month. So we'll know something by then. Can everybody hear me without this? Okay. We'll know. There we go. We'll know something by then. July 15th is the date. RSA is more upstream. That's an enrichment quota that's against Russian and the flow of Russian enrichment. I'm not really going to delve into that. The next few bullets I'm just going to skip because I get into them going forward as we delve into what we like to call the big 3. And these are the big 3 nuclear nations that everyone in this room needs to be watching if you're interested in the future of the nuclear fuel market. United States, Japan, and China are everything for the future of this market as it stands right now. You can make an argument that, well, why not South Korea? Sure, great. That they're also, no doubt about it, but if you see any kind of major shift up or down in these markets, this industry does not have legs as early as we hope it would, I would say. So U.S., unfortunately I had to change this slide before I sent it over because I forgot that the Pilgrim nuclear power plant shut down just a couple weeks ago. So it takes us from 98 to 97 operating. 2 units under construction at Vogtle in my home state of Georgia. Those are built by Westinghouse. Fortunately, Westinghouse bought a contractor that Chicago Bridge and Iron Shaw Group, and they kind of ran their 4-unit projects into the ground. Westinghouse went bankrupt, got bought up by Brookfield Partners, and now there's only 2 units under construction. The other 2 units in South Carolina have been abandoned. They're trying to figure out legislatively what to do with all the equipment that's sitting on site. For the U.S. as a whole, politics, public opinion, people like nuclear. The problem is people like cheap power too, and people vote with their dollars, and they've been voting for natural gas over anything clean as of late. As shown by the 8 premature reactor shutdowns since 2013. All 8 of those units were operational, operating just fine, and licensed for even more time. Some out 15 more years. So for the U.S., the red point says it, everybody can read, markets are everything. If we do not see a change in markets, the United States could stand to lose even more units, especially in merchant markets. PJM region spans some of the most populated parts of the east coast of the United States and into the Midwest, and that's where you have Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Jersey luckily got zero emission credits done. Illinois got zero emission credits done. These are subsidies to prop up nuclear power plants. It's been very mixed news. Hopefully, Ohio kind of gets the ball rolling legislatively and it spills over into Pennsylvania. That would be great for the future of U.S. nuclear. Moving on to Japan, excuse me. There's only 9 units online today. That's from 54 before Fukushima. Those utilities are sidelined and under onerous regulations by the NRA, Nuclear Regulation Authority, to retrofit their plants to the tune of billions of dollars each. And those that are close to the end of their 40th year of operation, they've made the decision, I'm done. Those that operate BWRs, which the Fukushima units were, many of those have said we're done. So we envision about 31 of 54 units that were operating before the Fukushima Daiichi disaster in 2011 will never come online. Long term, luckily, the Abe government is very pro-nuclear. They are a very business-oriented government, and some of the largest industries in Japan are also, closely allied with the nuclear industry. For example, Hitachi and so on and so forth. So those business lobbies speak loudly, and luckily they have a government that's favorable to them right now. However, there is a lot of anti-nuclear public sentiment towards nuclear. It is the way it is. People in Japan, it's a collectivist society, and they do not, when they are scorned, they do not really go back on it easily. So regulatory regime is stagnating any growth, and an anti-nuclear public sentiment is definitely abrasive on the future growth prospects there. But still, even thus, UxC is projecting we're getting up to much higher generation out in the 2028-2030 period. The problem is this chart ends at 2030. Several reactors are going to start reaching the end of their operational lifetimes. All reactors in Japan have been mandated to 40 years unless they get special authority to continue operating past there. So I apologize to be such a downer. Let's talk about happy things. China is the most important country for nuclear power. And I can say it again, but I won't. But if you care about the future of this market, your eyes need to be on China. Massive growth has already occurred. To put 45 reactors in operation, most of those built in the last 15 years, 20 years, and 11 units under construction as of June 19th. That's incredible growth. By 2030, we expect 86 units online, and about mid-2030, because of the retirements of old reactors in the United States, China will overtake the U.S. in terms of the largest reactor operator on Earth. But even with a huge increase, and this is more telling to how much power is produced in China, just bar none from any source, nuclear is only going to account for about 4 to 5% of the total. Now, you can look at that and just go, wow, that's crazy. Or you can say, well, there's a lot of opportunity there. China has shown that they are very receptive, at least in the public, internationally, that they are receptive to carbon policies to reduce carbon drastically. The problem is they have such a massive coal industry that they can't just sideline to build new nuclear power plants. So it's a delicate dance, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible. We recently got some great news that the country snapped a 3-year hiatus and approved 2 new nuclear power plant projects for 4 total reactors at Huixiao and Taipingling. This is more significant not just because it's like, oh, hey, yeah, 4,000 more megawatts of nuclear power, that's great, but it's hopefully that begins the ball rolling again in China in earnest. And the 2 major nuclear power companies there, CGN and CNNC, their chairmen have both come out and said, the government knows we can't keep going like we're going. We have to get back into building reactors on a massive scale. And moreover, the picture down at the bottom is the Fucheng 5 and 6 nuclear reactors. Those are the export model analogs that China is going to start shipping to other countries. And they're also building in Pakistan right now at Karachi 2 and 3. So when they have those are called Halong 1 HPR 1000 reactors. When they have those operational, we expect to see a greater emphasis by China to push into export markets to sell their reactors once they're up and running. And they have demonstration units that they can point to and say, hey, look, these are great. We'll sell them. We'll finance them. We'll build them. We have the supply chain. All right, so now that we have a brief overview on demand, we're going to get into supply, which is why you're all here. Global uranium production declined for the 2nd year in a row. It fell about 16 million pounds to 138 million last year. The production decline, unfortunately, was largely attributable to Cameco's majority-owned McArthur River being sidelined in January. A further 4 million pound cut to Kazakh production that was announced by the government, and the shutdown of Paladin Energy's Langer Heinrich mine in Namibia. However, some of that global decline was offset by production gains from BHP's Olympic Dam operation following a big smelter refurbishment campaign in 2017. And the continued ramp-up of China General Nuclear, CGN's Husab mine in Namibia. We're projecting them to get to about 14 million pounds in the next 2 years or so. Spot price improvement is expected over the longer term. There is no doubt. It truly, right now, in the nearer term, depends on the extent of future production cuts. Some of the biggest uranium production companies have come out and said, for example, Kazatomprom has said time and again now, if the market looks like it does in 2021, we will not be ramping up production as planned. In the interim, the deferment of production leaves major players like Cameco to come to the market and buy. It also leaves investors interested, why most of you are here in this room. 2018 was kind of a critical year because we saw the investor community come back actually to the market. And while it wasn't, to the tune of what we saw in 2007 to just about 11, 14 million pounds taken off the market is a pretty sizable quantity considering we traded just under 90 million pound spot last year. Thus far this year, Yellowcake, a uranium investment fund, has picked up about another 1 million pounds from Kazatomprom to put in their inventory. There's another uranium investment fund here based in Toronto, UPC. They picked up more last year, so you're seeing a lot of good first mover signals. Going forward, though, at least near term, once again, spot price improvement is going to be wholly dependent on who cuts production and where, which kind of leads us into this slide. These are the mines taken offline since 2011, totaling about 39.5 million pounds. The lion's share of that, of course, is more recent from McArthur River. these are just slides for you to look at. Once again, my slide deck is in the back there. So again, despite cutting production another 4 million pounds last year, Kazakhstan still absolutely killed it. Largest producer at 56 million pounds. The country's 2019 production target has also been lowered, but it's still expected to total about 59 million pounds this year. This is the same thing by company. I just kind of show you that Kazatomprom, with their massive resource base of ISR production, currently reigns supreme. So, sorry once again to depress you. This should make you happy. This is showing nearly 800 million pounds are uncovered through 2040. 2030. If I could show you the 2040 chart, but my boss said, let's not just hand out the company secrets. It looks even better out in time because we get to account in our modeling for new projects coming online, serial production of reactor types like the HPR 1000, export growth led by China and Russia especially. This slide should at least inspire some confidence in the future of the nuclear power and thus uranium demand. For the longer term look, you can see here the red line is our URM base market demand. That is just demand without any inventory build. But generally utilities do not just buy for needs. Another important point that we find at UX that gets lost on it seems like especially in the investor community is a nuclear utility is generally going to be a nuclear engineer who is buying fuel. It is somebody who is completely risk averse. They want to have secure supply. They want to have supply on site. They want to have uranium at the converter. They want to have conversion at the enricher. They want to have enrichment at the fabricator, and they want to have fabricated fuel in the back of the reactor ready to go. So what is important here is the area out here in the 27, 28, 29 time frame where secondary supplies, those consist of government inventories, enricher sales, and utility inventory. As they are worked down, there opens quite a lot of room, and especially into the mid-2030 time frame. Furthermore, the planned production line, the green line you see there, is not all guaranteed. It's just how we model it on a conservative estimate. I'm sorry, I do want to say one more thing about this. This assumes that McArthur River comes back online in 2023. So if you want to take this and do your own analysis, great. Just know that that's where that is. And out in 2025, there's about 25 million pounds of inventory considered in there, which is getting worked off. That's a good thing. But it takes the production cuts today to get to a more open market out in time. So now that I've shown you kind of like the lay of both supply on top of demand, these are the key questions we see at UX for the uranium market. We'll call this for the 3 to 5 year period. And that's number one with the bullet. How long is McArthur River going to stay offline? You cannot have an asset that is that productive, that cost efficient, stay offline, because the longer it does, the more a cap it puts on future prices. It needs to be factored in the market eventually, but when Cameco decides to do that remains to be seen. Will the financial firms continue to buy? Yellowcake, like I said, already picked up another 1 million pounds recently. Are they looking to come back this year, especially as the spot price has been kind of flat around the 24, 25 time frame for our region for a few months now? As I spoke about, the slowdown in China's nuclear program post-Fukushima is starting to looks like it's starting to loosen up. What's the future for Chinese long-term contracting? They, too, are very risk-averse. They have shown their MO is to secure supply, secure foreign mines, call it a domestic foreign mine, have that supply source flow back to us, just like CNUC recently almost completing the purchase on the Rossing mine from Rio. Will the 232 investigation result in tariffs or a Buy America quota? And how will this impact U.S. utilities? Right now, the U.S. utilities we talk to, and we talk to all of them, are all sitting on the sidelines. They are very hesitant to go out and contract for new supply that's likely foreign if they are going to be mandated to buy U.S. supply in the near term. So the 232 decision right now is, if anything, it's put a big pause on any kind of sustained market recovery. Going forward, will Kazatomprom continue to show supply discipline? They've said as much. They are doing, as their CFO Riaz Rizvi said at the WNFC conference, we are doing as we say and saying as we do. They recently went partially public. They had a stock float, and because of that, they are now beholden to their shareholders, not necessarily their government. So they've done a really great job. They've said this is what we're going to produce, and that's what they produce. So it just remains to be seen how they view how they'll handle the post-2021 period. Japanese utility inventories from shuttered reactors. How will those be folded back into the market? We've seen some over time. There's, they'll be moved through a trader here, a little bit there. The Japanese are generally quite averse to dumping because they also have to borrow money to buy fuel. So it doesn't do them any good to dump fuel, just get a little bit of cash and still have to pay for more fuel that they have, they can never use. So they've shown really good restraint thus far. How long will that continue? Will they shift their inventories to other Japanese utilities? How will that weigh psychologically on the market going forward? And then the last one, is there a shift away from traders competing with producers in the utility midterm and long-term markets? I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. I really am not supposed to weigh in on things like that. Penultimate slide. This is just our take of the next 5 or so years out, where we project our near-term spot outlook. Everybody in here wants the red line to happen, and nobody in here wants the green line to happen. So just know that we weight the blue line the heaviest. So it is expected over the longer term to appreciate, but wholly depends on the extent of future production cuts today. While not rapid, supply rationalization, investor demand, 232 driving utilities back to the market quicker potentially. There's a general market view that the low $20 area is a bottom. We can't stay on a bottom forever. It's just psychologically, it's a huge driver to know that people on both sides of the equation, suppliers and utilities, both kind of agree that $18 that we saw at the end of 17 was probably the lowest we'll ever see. Knock on wood. Now to round it out, uranium market today, I'm sorry to say, still a buyer's market, has been for quite some time. Inventories, secondary supplies remain elevated, but the good thing is they are being worked off, and over the longer term, they are coming down. There is no doubt. As I showed on the yellow slide, the uncovered requirements widen significantly after 2025. This sets the stage for sustained price recovery and solid projected increases in the post-2030 period. Current prices are not strong enough to bring production to the market, thus prompting concerns of a potential supply shortfall, especially in the mid to late 2020s. And with that, I open it up to questions. Yes? It's a great question. It's a great question. I think it comes down to requirements and management. If currently U.S. utilities, while they have shown for the second straight year declining inventories, it is hard to go to your senior C-suite management and say, hey, this is a great time to buy. I think the real reason is the C-suiter will say, well, look at what you have in inventory. Why do you need to buy anything? Work that off first, and then we'll go buy cheap uranium. Coupled with the fact that there is significant risk aversion amongst several U.S. utilities that are, especially in merchant markets, that out in time, they might not be operating your reactor. So they've moved to a more, what a utility would call a just-in-time approach, which is probably a 5-7 year, time frame. Go ahead.
Well, I guess my small question is that, that's a question I get asked all the time is, why the heck are utilities saying?
Yeah.
Because of their own problems.
Oh, yeah.
And secondly, do you think when Japan left the market, the long-term mentality and sanity left it? And now we've got these Western utilities which drove the price from 18 to 30, right?
Yes.
And now they've left the market because they're scared of 232, which is what total 12.5 million pounds
Yep.
in a 195 million market.
Yep.
Makes no possible rational sense. They've stopped buying.
Right.
So, how do you explain that mentality of the utilities because they're the ones now driving? Because that's my observation is Fukushima didn't stop demand for uranium.
Right.
Machines, the way contracting has been done for a long time now.
Yeah.
Because Japanese long-term mentality left.
Sure. Yeah. I would say, well, we have seen long-term contracts. There is no doubt. It is not to the scale that we saw back in 2007 when people were inking, base escalated contracts at $75, $85 a pound. I mean, it's just not the case anymore. I think you are absolutely right. With the exit of Japan and the entrance of way more trader activity in this market than existed. So I started in this industry for the nuclear renaissance in 2008, and boy, I've held its hand all the way down here. So may as well stick around. But neither here nor there. The fact of the matter remains, traders have become such a primary part of this market for the midterm market, which is longer than spot, but not long enough to be called long-term. So because of that, it is, as you said, it's fundamentally changed the way utilities contract in this market. Again, I think there is a lot of nervousness, at least timidness amongst U.S. utilities, Western European utilities as well, when they're looking at, especially regarding Western European utilities, we're looking at a government that's not favorable to nuclear. Why am I going to go out and sign a base escalated long-term contract for 5 years of deliveries? I can just go out and get midterm material. A trader will find a way to finance it for me. Boom, bam, I've got inventory when I need it. So yes, it has fundamentally changed the way this market is done. Furthermore, last year we saw almost 90 million pounds of spot material. The previous record was in 2011, and it was 59 million pounds of spot material. So to show you that the market is becoming, at least for this market, more just in time, it is the new standard. The long-term base escalated contracts are not as they used to be, but at the same time, it should be said, and that is not to disparage utilities or say that they've lost their minds. They are interested in longer-term material if they are sure about future operations of their reactors. The problem is they also have a lot of inventories. The good news is inventories are coming down. The ESA, the European Nuclear Agency, is set to publish their report in 2 weeks. We've already seen preliminary data that shows that Western European nuclear utilities are going to continue to drop inventories. That's a great thing. U.S. utilities saw the second consecutive year of decreases after 8 straight years of increases. So all these things kind of swing the pendulum back, hopefully out in time, to more we'll secure supply for out in time. We know our reactor is going to operate. Let's ink a contract. Anyways? Oh.
Your cost analysis is going to come out in the next couple of months or so.
Yeah, and the middle of July.
Right. So coming back to the last point you have there, which is
sorry.
current price is not strong enough for new mine, new production. The cost curves are moving to the point whereby industry focus is going to be more on production from a better grade mines, and then exploration going to make still continue for looking for the better quality uranium production.
Mm-hmm.
And your cost curves expected in 2018, coming 2019, there'll be a shift whereby it's going to be higher or lower, the industry cost curves.
The industry of production costs, like aggregated.
C1, yeah.
So I'm going to have to kind of not answer that question directly, and here's why. We take every operating project on Earth today, and that means from India, where it is completely inelastic production, where the government says produce, we don't care if it's $90 a pound, all the way down to the best mines in Kazakhstan, where they're getting $8 cash costs. So the report is not complete, so I can't say, the total curve fell 3%. I don't have that data for you yet. I'm sorry.
So come back to the uncovered demand.
Mm-hmm.
2025 onwards is a huge number.
Yeah.
These numbers always shift every time.
Right.
Throughout periods. So
Right.
Being pushed forward.
There you go.
Okay. So security of supply,
Mm-hmm.
which is an issue. You got over $1 trillion, maybe $2 trillion of reactors in the world.
Mm-hmm.
404 odd reactors. You got trillions of dollars of capital investment. You cannot secure supply. Got to come to the point not only buying the uranium in the market, but also going to the mine and owning the mine as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see your clients in that end any interest that they may go back and come back to the production cycle instead of the market demand?
Previously, in the last upcycle, and even into 2011, where prices were rising up to the $70 per pound range, we saw that. Lately, no, not whatsoever. Utility is pretty well covered with options for fuel. That may change because of 232, but I would say I doubt it.
And the new contracts still going to be base price free market?
I'm sorry?
The new contracts being signed in the uranium business, you expect kind of continue to be base plus?
So those are long-term contracts. They are being signed, but right now, like I said, utilities are sitting on a lot of inventory. There's also secondary supplies flowing in from enricher underfeeding, which is a segment of the market I said I really didn't want to get into because I don't have enough time to talk about it. But I think the real point is you're going to see a return to base escalated contracts when spot prices get too close to base escalated contracts not to. And we came close. We got up to just over $29 a pound a few months ago. Since it's been tapering off and has only now started to turn back around this past week. The thing is, when that gap between spot and term closes, utilities start getting worried that other people are going to jump in the market and jump spot, and term will run with it. So why not lock in now? So I think it kind of goes back to what Dev said. It's like, why not buy right now? There's a lot of reasons. Most of them fall back on we have inventory. We don't know if we can operate in 10 years, so we're not going to sign a long-term contract right now.
Just last question.
Yeah.
Spot market last year over 90 million pounds.
It's
so
close to, it was 89.
So far
Yeah.
this year, where are we?
23, I believe. Don't
I expect the numbers to be up to 90 million again this year.
That kind of goes back to this slide. Is how much will financials continue to buy? We have been in contact with several financial investors and institutional investors who are interested. Like, tell me what the next 3 months or 3 years looks like, and essentially, financial buying propelled that total to a great degree. If they continue to stay in the market this year, I think you can see a much higher, but I don't think we'll be getting back to like 89 million pounds.
One last question maybe here, and then we'll move on to the next speaker.
Yeah, hi. You had a number in there for USAB?
Yeah.
I think it's 14 million.
14, yeah.
Is that, first of all, what's the confidence level in that number, and where's the visibility of that number come from? And secondarily, because you've got models that go out more than a decade,
Oh yeah.
like what's the number that's based in those models? Because it must be the single most important source of uranium for China.
Okay. Let me go back to the first question. I believe was where does that number come from?
It's not 14 now.
It's not 14 now. No. I believe they got 6 last year. Offhand, I will check that and let you know for sure. We're seeing it ramp to 14 after this year, at the end of this year, going into 20. 2, is it the most important source of supply for China? That's probably a fair assumption. As far as a Chinese, wholly owned entity in another country, foreign-owned asset, yes. But China also has, joint ventures in Kazakhstan as well. They have offtake agreements. They're in so many different projects to some degree that I guess I could say that while it's debatable, you could call USAB their number one asset. And then the third question was?
Well, no, it was that it's their largest single asset.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So does 14 start getting baked into the numbers starting
Yes.
next year?
Yes.
And
Yes.
So basically taking their internal numbers and accepting them.
Sure. We've been to the mine. Yeah, we're counting on it. They had some ramp up issues. They were pretty well publicized, especially for Chinese foreign-owned investment. But we've been on site. We've seen things happening. We know the geology in the region. We know the region quite well and what to expect. We understand what they had problems with. Their most recent problem has actually been their blasting contractor has been found to be negligent, and the Namibian Mine Workers Union has come out and said we're going to down tools. They came to a meeting of the mines. Things are fine again, but it is important to note that with CNUC buying the Rossing mine and that deal looking to be as good as done later this year, China is going to own a lot of Namibian supply. And the Namibian government has come out and said recently, if you saw the headlines, we'll allow you to do this, we'll allow you to buy this mine, we'll allow you to continue operating USAB, but you need to respect our laws. So it sounds like there could be a little bit of tension there between the Chinese state-owned enterprises and the Namibian government. So that's another point that very easily could be on the future questions to watch. That could be big out in time if it should kind of boil over. So.
And we'll have plenty of time for you to ask questions at the networking break and during cocktails afterwards to Philip. But thank you very much, Philip. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.